all the food that you've ever eaten in your life, that is in an archive. It's archived in your body. You're carrying it around in your body, except that the only way that you can access it is through memory. You can't recreate the exact food that you ate earlier. You can only recreate the memories of it. So now that the body is the locus of the archive, if you're thinking of it as the text, the way to read it is through memory. But memory is completely subjective. It's subjective in and of itself also, but it is also subjective because it is inflected by the individual taste of the person whose memories are being accessed. So, for example, maybe you have a memory of something you ate when you were fairly young, let's say 10 years old, but it has all kinds of, maybe it was a sweet on a festival, it has all kinds of associations with it of happiness, joy, family, all of these sorts of things, because of the specific nature of the context, but also now because of later associations you have created with the idea of sweetness, that it's a way of celebration to have sweets, and all of those, like all the various associations that we have with sweetness, the taste, are now inflecting the memory that was 10 years old or say 5 years old when maybe you didn't already have those associations. So, this doesn't sound very unusual because colloquially we think of taste as being completely subjective. We think, in various languages, like in Hindi you will say swad anusar, or in French they say chacun son goût. In English you will say, it might suit your taste, your taste might vary, adjust it to taste. All of these sorts of things. So we think of taste as being something very individual.
Work, I was very sick once, and because I was working in hotel industry, you have to work for sometimes 15-16 hours a day and without any off days and all that, and I was really sick, and so I was at home, and like I could not work for a few days, and it's a very new thing for me. So I went to a Ayurveda doctor, and I was trying to figure out that what is the problem. So it comes to lifestyle problem, and also the food that I was eating, because I'm in like half of the time right then I was mostly working in Italy and in India, so sometimes I'm there, so I'm eating lot of cheese heavy food and all these things. And then in India, just before I got sick, I was in doing a destination wedding in Rajasthan. So like the food was like everywhere, and also as a chef, like I was also working with lot of abundance of ingredients. Like if I want in Delhi, I want things from France, from Italy, everything I was getting. Like we used to serve truffle during season and all that. But the thing is that so it's an abundance of ingredient, and as a chef I also felt that okay, I have the I can do anything with anything. The creativity is like whatever you do, that is like if it is creative, you do give it in a plate and people appreciate that's the creativity, that's the mode of operation that I was driven by. But then then suddenly my Ayurveda doctor started telling me that you can't eat this with that with that, and then I was like, I didn't know what to do, and so I started working on my own diet, and I came up with lot of combinations that now in any Indian city you see everywhere. Some of them, like one example will be like milk and banana. This combination, like everybody has banana milkshake. So in Ayurveda, this is a deadly combination. So you cannot digest it, but it is not only available in the form of milkshake, also traditionally it's available, because like I'm Bengali, I grew up eating banana and milk and flat rice, flattened rice, or murmura, that kind of thing. So it's actually there. So it's a new world completely opened up to me, and I was mostly working with my own diet, with my Ayurveda doctor. And gradually I was thinking, and I realized, which we tried to write in our concept for when we started Edible Archives in Kochi Biennale, that is that creativity is actually, like, if you talk about literature, art and all these things, it can be objective, but when it comes to food, the creativity is subjective. It actually, like, the whatever you are eating, that is going to one single person's body. And so whatever is going, if you actually write down, like one of the exercise my doctor used to make me do is that you write down whatever you are eating, and you are a chef, now you break it down and write that what are the ingredients you are eating in the same meal or something, or same day. So then I started thinking more deep into that the subjectivity needs to be like accounted when we are thinking of creativity in food. So for Kochi Biennale we started working on, so I did a bowl in Kochi Biennale, like it was a art project slash food project slash an installation. So we were working with different kinds of rice from all over India. The rice varieties which are all the indigenous rice varieties which are endangered or not endangered, like some of the rice varieties says Ambe More, which is not endangered, but the seed got mixed up in the field, so the variety which we get sometimes, they are not like a open pollinated kind of a variety that otherwise which will be a pure variety. So we were basically, the focus was that, but at the same time what I was also doing that the project, so we did all 180 bowls. Every day was a different bowl, a different combination and a different 6 taste balance. So this was the practice that I went through. This is a photo from China we will come back to, but I want to show you a couple of our bowls. So we picked up, like during working with the project, we realized that rice, generally we have a perception that rice is either a taste which is like neutral taste, or it can be sweet because of the starchiness. But we came up with rice varieties, like a rice from Tamil Nadu called Kattuyanam. So that has a bitter bitter taste, or a rice from Bengal called Kala Bhat, which has a chocolate aftertaste which turns into a bitter taste on your palate. So, and then because we were doing those kind of combination, because every day our bowl we used to work on, like before that we collected the rice for almost a year, and almost for 2 months before the Biennale started, we worked on this whole thing, that everyday tasting and come up with things. So that was our major practice, which actually helped me to understand that how to balance. Of course, I was also constantly in touch with my Ayurveda doctor, and I also met more and more doctors in Kerala. And it's not for the quest is not to, like, I will not become a doctor, Ayurveda doctor, but I'm trying to understand that, because food is constantly we are consuming every day, everybody is eating, but what are the ingredients, how it is going, this thing, how the balance is. So see, this kind of bowls we were doing every day a different bowl. Whoever has come to Biennale, like everybody almost, you have come to our place and eaten a kind of bowl. So I'll mostly talk about the practice, because through the practice only I can tell you the China connection and all that. So like this yam, it's actually a Chinese, in China also you get this yam. It's the purple yam. It also has a sweet taste to it. But if in our general perception also, how we eat, we never eat things as it is, like, you know, you will not boil or steam and eat them. So because we were going through this practice and process, we are in the practice of eating everything in its taste, and we try to keep a note of that. And so this has become a very important practice. And after that, even when I was doing a pop-up in Paris for a month, and there also I tried to work with not exactly 6 days, but it became a form that I can talk about to a person very easily, because not only because of the Ayurveda connection, the interesting thing, like in Paris, it was very it was very easy for me to talk about it, because there people understand contrast. When they're eating something, they understand contrast very well, like why they use that, like the pungency of the mustard there, the Dijon mustard there, and then why they will have a little bit of a berry thing in the or a sweet dressing in a salad. It became a tool to for me to talk to people also. And like I before that, I was mostly in restaurants spaces. We talk about different kind of textures. We don't talk much, we do. And there we mostly it's different texture, different color. But this consciousness about the taste and the contrast between the taste also became a tool that we started working with. After that, we went to Lingnan University, and where Dr. Tejaswini Niranjana actually called us, and we spoke to the students. And also there we did something similar, which was that we did a cooking demo. Now it is like, we also, whenever we are doing a cooking demo, say in another cultural space, so you have to find a medium to talk about things or make people interested. Otherwise, I am cooking some Indian food, how will everybody will be interested? But it became very interesting, and everybody participated, and we have very interesting videos and photos from there. Because I was following this with the 6 days, I didn't do the Ayurveda thing elaborately, but this contrast, people understood this contrast. Like, it was very easy for me to make them understand that, okay, the pork is actually sweet in nature, because in Chinese medicine, in TCM, it's constantly talk about different meat and their inherent nature. And pork is supposed to be not sweet, salty. And so I was just combining 2 ingredients, like I was combining it with chili and salt, and then it was very easy for me to talk to them. And then Mr. Johnson was also there, and he told us to come to Suzhou to do, like, we were anyway going for a residency, and we were staying in Suzhou in China for a month, and or 3-4 weeks. And there also he said that, why don't you come and first give a talk on this, and then work on this with other people from China and the scholars from there, and understand that what is there a communication, like, is there any similarities? And we got a very interesting feedback when we gave the talk on Ayurveda medicine, and like Ayurveda and the taste, the 6 taste, because there was a Rinpoche who got really excited, and he started talking about how in China also there are this 5 tastes, and all coming from the 5 elements. And in India also, like the Ayurveda, the whole base of that also comes from the 5 elements, and he got really excited. Shalini will tell you about the 5 elements and how it translates to 6 taste, and in TCM 5 taste. So that is another very interesting learning that we had. And then we took that learning to which actually then we started talking, because we were there for a month and constantly working on these things. There are a lot of other problems sometimes, like in translation, certain things, like first few days we could not like sweet, sour, salt, these are easy, and but the complicated ones were pungent and astringent. So pungent is like we were either tasting and asking, and they said like something called la. In Chinese, everybody used to say yes, we understand la, and we are not understanding. So, and how do you differentiate between spicy and pungent? Then we realized that we need to describe this pungent and the heat of which comes from chili and the spicy, because in our context, in Indian food context, spicy means which is with masala, spice, and hot means with the chili family thing, or it can come from pepper or ginger. But there then finally we also were in a banquet. Then we came up with these things. Okay, we can describe that between the nose and the tongue, there you can feel it. That's actually the point of pungency. Like to even understand, because we are actually talking. Sometimes we used to feel that we are talking about the same thing in two different language. So because of this thing. And sometimes also we used to feel that we are talking, but we really don't know where to pin down, and that's why this project is so important to us, and we really want to do it very thoroughly. We want to spend time, and we already planned that how can we take time off from the restaurant so that we can spend more time doing this, because when we were there and constantly discussing this, then we actually understood that why it's important to have this conversation. We are talking about so many similar things, and philosophically and historically also certain things, like even a conversation around bitter. So we were talking about like bitter in India, mostly we have it towards the beginning of a meal, like we don't have it towards the end of a meal. And then they were saying that no, bitter is considered because it gives a sadness. It is not a very like sweet thing you have in the beginning, and bitter you have the end of the meal. So that kind of conversation was but we don't know exactly if that will be the pattern everywhere in China or how it is followed, but at least those conversations, those stories were coming up. So that is what we wanted to tell. Now what we want is that before we start talking about, so there are 6 tastes in Ayurveda: sweet, salt, sour, bitter, pungent, and astringent. So we want you to, and the whole idea of these tastes is that Ayurveda talks about body, mind, and all these things together. It's not only body or only mind or all these things, like your mental energy, all these things has to go together. And why this 6 taste? Because this 6 taste in some sense, so there are 3 doshas and all that the theoretical part of it Shalini will discuss, but why this contrasting thing somewhere balance your palate plus make you more conscious. Like the whole aim is to be a more conscious being. So this balance every day, because eating is something which is happening every day. So if the food is mindless, so then it doesn't nourish your body in the same way. So that is why the contrast. Now we have given some tasting portion for 6 tastes, and we want you to taste them. There I have just picked up some khakra and some pickles around here. We didn't do anything. We have just put them according to the taste, but we want you to taste so that we can go to our next point from there.
Very
strongly associated with a number of things. So each element is associated with the direction, it can be associated with the season, with colors, and also with tastes. So like fire is bitter, earth is sweet. It's a very one-to-one kind of a thing. Wood is sour, metal is pungent, water is salty. In Ayurveda, that immediate one-to-one association with taste is not there, but tastes are very important to the sense of how the body is balanced. So to have a, like each body has its own nature between these three, Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and then to balance, because we live in an environment, to balance what is happening inside your body with what is happening outside of your body, you can only do that by eating, like by determining what you eat, and what you eat either increases or restores the balance. So in theory at least, if you eat all 6 tastes in the right proportion and everything, then you will have a balanced sense, and you will feel that sense of mindfulness that Anumitra was talking about. So now that you've had these 6 tastes, do you feel balanced?
Do you feel mindful?
Do you feel mindful? Maybe you do feel mindful, but I slightly doubt that you feel balanced after eating this. And Anumitra will explain why.
So basically, it's not only about balancing this 6 tastes. It's also, you have to think about the guna. So each thing, actually they are processed things, and so now you have to point down to each taste with their own attributes. So we have put 6 tastes here. Whoever wants, they can just come and have a look. Right now, if you want to, you can do, or definitely taste the kale and the tomato. I have put the tomato because generally tomato is not considered according to Ayurveda to be sweet. But then we will also move to a point that in every season, every thing has its own taste. Like mango, so you can have like mango is supposed to be sweet, and it can, if it is unripe, it can be astringent and little bit of sour, but it can also be pungent if it is over ripened. So everything has its then it's very complicated. As we go in, it's just it takes you more deep into it. So whenever you get a chance, taste them, but it is like this, that it's each attribute of things. So the balancing is not like this. So this is just, we did it to show that is it called a balanced or not. So but actually if you taste things, so it depends on each ingredients and their guna, and it's not easy to balance a meal. Even I am talking from a restaurant point of view, where it is more difficult, because if you are cooking for one person, when I was cooking and managing my own balance, it's a different thing. But how do you do it in a restaurant setup where it's standardized, right? You have to do little bit of standardization. That is the method we work with, and how do you do it? So it becomes very challenging. Now we have, because now it's been almost 3.5 years I am working with this, it's easy for me. And also in Goa I work with a doctor, and I do panchakarma food. People who do panchakarma, I do their food, like with the doctor. So they work with me for 15 days and all that. So I have a sense of, because of this constant thing, but I will not say that I am I understand this very well. It's a very, very challenging thing. But yeah,
in the restaurant,
yeah,
some of us come and we say, oh, give me this and give me this, and they're not actually, they're from the wrong gunas, the wrong place. What would you say?
I will not say anything. Customers are God, and I will say have it. I have tried to balance. In Kochi I had a choice, because I was doing one bowl where I could balance this. But in restaurant, people come with their own choice. I generally, I have tried to do things that at least within a dish it is not balanced. Within then certain things we still say, like I really don't appreciate people having avocados at night, because post sunset it is aggravate many things. So it's generally I don't put it in the menu. I put it as a special, and I only run it during the day and don't put it at night. So we do this kind of thing, and like there are other things like because I have worked in Italian food for a long time, so I also don't do dairy and sea fish together. Then also we don't, like, I'm actually, because also another important things in both Ayurveda and TCM is that where it is located, the place where you are consuming what is very important. Like you can't think that okay, you are here and you can have anything from anywhere. Yes, you can, but actually that is not always good for our body. So in Goa I have reduced like doing much of the Italian food, because like Goa is also a place where like the dairy is you don't get those cheese, and also the weather also doesn't suit. Also, I don't want to give a chance to people who are having the seafood and cheese together. I don't like, you can't do much in a restaurant setup as much, because it's a personal practice which I do, and I try to apply that in my restaurant, but you can't always do it constantly. So these are actually, it will take you to the exact guna of everything. So say there is a kale which is really bitter. So and the guna of the kale is actually bitter. And then what happens? So some taste you taste on your tongue, and then there is also how it is processed in the gut. It is not the same as you taste in the tongue is what happens in the gut. So we also, the balancing is also managing those things. So it's a difficult process, but it is also very subjective. So you cannot actually do it for a very overall kind of a thing. You can only do it for a very subjective manner. And seasonality is another very important thing, which I was telling you, that this tomato, what you have, if you have right now, it is very sweet, but it was not sweet 2 months ago, and it will not be this sweet after a few months also. And so I wanted to show you another thing.
I just want to interject to say that we also grow a lot of our own fruit and vegetable, not so much fruit, but vegetables definitely, and herbs. So it's also for I think many of us a very new thing to think about seasonality when you actually grow something versus when you buy in the market. When you buy in the market, you get a sense, even now at least in India, you do get a sense that okay, this fruit might be in season, or this vegetable might be out of season and it has come from somewhere else. But if you're actually growing it yourself, you can tell that the tomato, if you pluck it on day 6 of being ripe versus day 4 of being ripe, what is the difference in the taste? So we are also going to give a practical demonstration of this, because
I don't know the taste of this pomelo. I have not tasted it so far, so we really don't know. This can taste bitter, this can taste sweet, and this can also taste little astringent. But this is the
or sour.
Or sour. So we thought that like there can be things like this, like anytime. So when we were also planning for today's workshop or tomorrow's workshop, I could not give a list of things to buy. I was just telling Bhumi, no, I have to go and taste things, and to understand that whether it is that complicated. It's not as simple as when we explain it. It is that complicated. It has a seasonal curve, and the best use of this seasonality I have seen in kaiseki tradition of like it's a Japanese tradition, because I used to work in Japan for a long time, and so I have visited lot of kaiseki things where what happens that it is a meal where you get to eat everything which is available in that local area, and also it will have a peak, like say a corn, when it is in the peak of its sweetness, then certain dish will be made, and otherwise it will not be made into that dish, then it will be something else. So I think that it's also like a practice. It's absolutely like, you know, how you practice classical music, or how you practice you have to go through that to understand, because all these knowledge around us in India is quite missing, to speak true. Like you know, in my experience, it is most of the places this knowledge is not so much important, and this thing. So this is also a journey that we have to go through, but I thought that this kind of a project which can take us to, as you practice more, as you read and talk more about it, you understand this better.
I think that also I will give one more example that we were talking about with the colocasia. Is a plant grown in a lot of places, including Goa. There are many, again, this is complicated.
Is it cultivated? You say it is grown.
Some types are cultivated, most of them grow wild. Like they just come up on their own in the monsoon. And in Goa. No, some types are cultivated, but mostly it grows wild in Goa. So this is a plant that traditionally there are many types that can be eaten, but again it's a very complicated thing. Some varieties, the leaf can be eaten in a certain time of the year. Some varieties, the tubers can be eaten. Some varieties, the tubers can only be eaten if they're processed in a certain way. Some varieties, the stem can be eaten, but you can't say this is an edible colocasia, this is an inedible colocasia. It's all about the processing and the time of the year. But this knowledge was there in Goa. People reference it. People talk about, oh, we have these kinds of colocasias. But in practice, mostly the colocasia is not eaten. There are a couple of traditions associated with it around Ganesh Chaturthi, etc. So at that
root
time,
is eaten.
I'm talking about the plant, the stems and the leaves. The root is eaten regularly, but just a few kilometers, like 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers away in Uttar Karnataka, there are the same plants are eaten. Again, this is slowly becoming less and less common, but they are eaten, and there's a greater sense of this is when to eat and how to eat it. But we felt also that when it comes to inter-Asia research, the same thing is happening on a larger scale. There is a surprising commonality between a lot of the things we saw in parts of China. In fact, one of the dishes we do in our restaurant is inspired by something we ate in China from Shanxi province. It's a certain thing with brinjal and long beans and peanuts. When we came to Goa, we found the same kind of not the same kind of brinjal, but we found a similar brinjal, similarly long beans and peanuts in season at the same time, just as they grow in China. And so we make our version of it using indigenous Goan beans, brinjals, and peanuts. But we had to go to China to figure out that this dish is there. There's also
otherwise our perception of Chinese food is that carrot and capsicum and like these kind of things only with noodles or with rice, or like today also for lunch I had fried rice and chili chicken, but it is not.
It is not. It is.
It is not even that.
Yeah, it is something else. Or we were looking for khakra. We were looking for khakra, and the photo I took is one showing Szechuan Masti khakra and Chinese special khakra. I don't know what they are.
This is in Induben.
In Induben. One of you can go and try it, yes, and tell us what it is. But so our perception of China is very different from what actually is a perception of Chinese food, whatever that is supposed to mean, is very different. Also, this sense that things can be lost in one place but kept alive in another place, in possibly a different cultural context. We feel that is a very important thing to keep in mind while we are doing this kind of food research, to see what are the possibilities both here and there.
Yeah, one point I want to.
Yes.
Why is it so important to study about what is the difference? Because that difference is also there for Italian cuisine to India, right? The interpretation of food.
No, I don't mean the difference. I'm saying that the use of the ingredients, right?
So my question was, why do you think it is important to study this?
Because I'm talking particularly about ingredients in India and in that are more or less in common.
Lot of similarities.
Yeah, in Italy, I don't think there is.
Proximity?
Yeah, because
Partly, yes, partly.
Because, if you see even older scientific analysis, you will see that there are 9 areas where it shows that
Edible biodiversity.
and India
Around the
China
world, yeah.
is marked together, and it is apparently the 30% of edible biodiversity you see in this region.
The India-China region.
India-China.
Also, both countries, like right now they are nation states, but both these areas are immensely diverse geographically and in terms of weather and seasonality. But there is a lot of intermingling as well within the country, right? Like there's very little actual intermingling between India and China now, but within China and within India there is quite a lot of cross-cultural communication. So this is something both countries have in common, where you can see how various cuisines, like regional cuisines, are evolving in conversation with each other, which is not the case, say, necessarily in a smaller country like Italy. It might be the case all over Europe, but not just within Italy or just within France.
But mostly, I think that the commonality of ingredients, like if you talk, because I have worked in Italy a lot. What are the common ingredients you see? Tomatoes. So tomatoes are very different here. The tomatoes we get and the tomatoes there, it is absolutely different. Like they don't like when you taste it, they taste like two different. Absolutely different things. The cheese, now in India a lot of people are making cheese, but they are very, very different. Like a lot of near Sardinia and around that area, it's mostly sheep cheese. It's not even like goat cheese and cow cheese. And so like actually I find that
The meats are very different. Like the seafood, like an anchovy caught off the coast of Goa and an anchovy caught off the coast of Italy are going to taste completely different.
it is not that everything is similar in China and India also, but there are a lot of similarities that we saw, and it is actually not only because of the similarity, also the philosophy that we want to explore. It has the similar kind of thing. I don't know in like in Europe, like all these the 5 elements and then the description of the body. Even if you read the 5 description, like for all the 5 elements in Chinese medicine, also they describe the body type, that what is more in which body. So they describe that. They use almost similar kind of word. Even things like that, what taste what. Like today we were discussing mung beans. If you taste mung beans, generally like dry mung beans will not have any taste much. It's but if you taste it, so we were discussing that whether it's a good example or not. But both Chinese medicine and Indian medicine Ayurveda says that mung beans are sweet in nature.
So while for many of us we might think of it as a savory thing, but the guna of the bean is sweet. And in like colloquial, whatever, normal everyday Chinese sense, it is sweet because it's used in so many desserts and so on there. But while but it's the guna is the same across the two traditions. So that
And
also-
lot of other vegetables. Yes,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in Ayurveda, you will not find all the 5 meat theory that the Chinese medicine has. The beef is sweet, the chicken is astringent, and the pork is salty, and what else? There were 2 more. I don't remember, right?
I also don't remember. Sorry, mutton was something.
Salty, are you
Yeah.
talking about the particular
No,
preparation?
no, we are talking about the nature of the yeah.
Talking about when you tasted it probably, are you talking about the raw
No.
composition or is it a prepared thing or is it cured or processed?
No, I'm just
No.
saying that this like both in TCM and Ayurveda doesn't talk about processed thing. Like there is
No preparation, no at all.
Is it the pork?
The meat.
Yeah, meat
Yeah.
is saltier. Even the fat part.
It doesn't talk like that. It says that it's a 5 meat theory that like TCM have. And this is like not, I'm saying anything, I'm just quoting. Mutton is bitter, by the way, I remember one.
Yeah.
Chicken is
Astringent.
astringent. No,
Yes.
chicken is pungent.
No,
astringent.
astringent.
I think they're not talking
Yeah.
about the taste of the
Yeah, we are talking about its nature.
characteristics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So tasir is actually hot and cold.
Not only hot and cold. That's one of the
One of the
aspects. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually,
Yeah.
it also has the TCM and Ayurveda also discuss. Unani also has common things
Yes,
actually.
yeah.
The tasir ka jo hai na, like it's a polar description of everything.
Yes.
So that
so
is there
it is
in
either
both
heating
this.
or cooling. It is drying or not liquid, but like
Dry
oily, drying or oily, or smooth or rough. Like this sort of polar opposite is there in both of these things as well. But so yeah.
Fascinating presentation. But so this idea that this very fine balancing of characteristics, whether by flavor or by essence. So in different Indias we find different ideas of balance when
Yes.
we come to conscious eating. So if you look at currently one idea that maybe in currency is your plate must be divided into a certain proportion of carbs and fat and proteins. So but there's some notion of how do you integrate these very fine grained theories which are rooted in different traditions. How do you integrate them not just into commercial practice like you're trying to do, but also into some sort of holistic living,
Yeah.
conscious
So-
eating sort of project, because all these things also become such buzzwords.
Yes, and fads. So, like for a little while, there was this whole thing: eat the rainbow, and so you should
Yeah,
eat
or
things
by
in different
colours,
colors,
so,
and
yeah.
yeah. So, I think that what we want to do is to encourage that conversation, particularly between India and China, because we felt that the conversations are happening on their own, and in India, in China, but there's like remarkably little cross-cultural communication about this. And I don't think that it is actually, this is personal, I don't know what Anumitra thinks, I don't think it's possible to come up with one unified theory that if you just eat this, all your problems will be solved.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. But at least what is happening is that everything now, post-colonial colonization, etc., is that India is in conversation with the West, China is increasingly in conversation with the West, but India and China are not in conversation with each other, and we literally had to reorient ourselves when we were in China, because people kept telling us about the wisdom of the West, and it took us a while to realize that we are the West. India is the West. When you are in China, what is west of China? Parts of India. So the wisdom of the West is the wisdom of India. And we were like, okay, the wisdom of the West, I guess, but then it took us a while. So I think that conversation, that reorientation is a very important project and,
But, I
yeah.
have
Yeah.
this thing. I don't think it's always possible to integrate them, like because I have worked with all these principles. Because in Western, like our all restaurant training comes from a lot of them are coming from Western training, and it actually we have a this thing that a person can eat this much gram. So a plate, a main course plate should have this much gram of things, and so the meat has to be this grams, this, and so it's like that. Like any balanced restaurant food, like if at least wherever I have worked, it is like that you have to do. Especially like the upmarket kind of places, there is a standard, like in 5 stars and all that, there is a standard, like the kitchen gets this kind of a thing. But how do you integrate this? It's not possible to integrate. So I have done a couple of specials again in those restaurants where I have worked, and tried to do this kind of thing. But like I had to talk to my management that can I do this, because this will not have the same kind of balance, and that kind of thing. It's commercially, so it's not possible. It's very difficult. But even in personal space, how it is possible, because say the kind of green vegetables in a Western, like Western kind of continental food tells you a lot of them are raw vegetables. Now in Ayurveda, first thing is that you can't have raw greens. You have to at least boil and have it. Preferably. Yeah. So, so those things, how then you integrate? If the first basic principle, it's they cut it. So, but I think what I do now is that I pick up one path and I follow that for a long time to get into that. And like the Western also I had to do, because I have worked like as a professional, I had to work in many kitchens for many years, and I had to follow what my boss wants, or what is expected from me. Now I am trying to do what I want to do, and then I don't know what it will go. Yeah.
Question is a little building on what Hans just said, but moving a little away from it. In that, I'm curious as to how, once you found yourself located in China and once you were working with the space there, and this was a whole new vocabulary, whole new cultural memory that you were tapping into, how was it that you were able to, was it a whole seeking that was happening, or were there certain aspects of what you encountered there that spoke to you through food, and that's how you came to say, for instance, the Volcavia question. When you speak of Uttara Karnataka and you speak of Goa, and you're thinking about how there's a certain way in which this food is being propagated here, and there's that food over there as well. But that came to you from China.
I don't think so. I think we were already working on this because we were working on diversity and indigenous, this thing which was before China, and so there we just got that, okay, there is also this conversation is there, like it's possible, and like it's just we never had this conversation. Then also I did an event like where the state chef of Shuzhou and I was cooking, and it was a state event almost, like the from tourism department it was involved. We were in a group, in a WeChat group where the tourism involved, I was involved, and like there were a lot of people involved, and we were cooking. So it was like while you do these kind of things, then you understand also. Also it was not very new for me, because I have been already working on Chinese this thing, and I have lived in Japan. Like I have actually developed for one company I was working for, and I have traveled all over Southeast Asia and everywhere to develop to start a Asian restaurant for them. So I have been like traveling and in conversation with many chefs. They used to come and I used to go, and so it is. But there the whole idea of this 5 taste, 6 taste, Ayurveda, TCM, these things got activated, but not the overall idea of diversity.
Actually, that banquet was that we would cook 6 things in 6 days, and they would also cook 6 things in 6 days, and there would be like a, we were hoping it would be more like a jugalbandi, but it wound up being like first they sing, then we sing. And it was it was very interesting also to see how the same taste was being interpreted, because our sense of taste is not that always, that if something is bitter, it should not be that it's only bitter. You still have to eat it, so it will have other flavor, it will have some salt, it will have something else also to balance the bitterness. With some of the dishes it was not like that, especially the bitter one.
Because it's a bitter gourd stuffed with meat, and then it's a soup. It's
Boiled
in water.
So the soup is bitter, the bitter gourd is bitter, the meat is bitter, everything is bitter. So it was also interesting to think about like what balance means in these contexts, right? But then we had a similar experience with the 6 what are they called? 6 water immortals. Yeah.
But it was interesting
Yeah.
with all these banquets, all conversation used to happen.
Yes, yeah.
So all the stories used to come up, that how they're thinking of bitter that we told you, and
That do you start a meal with bitter or do you
bitter,
start it with sweet? And
so
why?
Those conversations, otherwise it never happens. So you
Yeah.
understand the similarities and a different in those contexts.
Someone else had a question.
Yes, yeah.
So, I think this may not be what you're looking at, because I think what you are probably the intervention that you're making is on this memory of taste, and at the second level, the philosophical potential overlap between India and China, right? But the third thing that interests me, and I think probably goes off Maya's question, is there, what is the research on, the actual nutritional properties of eating this way, whether you're in India or China? Is that a question you think about, or is that not really central to the project?
Can I just add on to that? I think that we bring in words like nutrition. I'm not sure that the principles of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine are using the framework of nutrition at all.
Yeah.
They're just looking at what's appropriate for a particular, a balancing act, if you like. I don't know what.
Yeah, also
Yeah.
like how say
it is not exactly, it's not, the nutrition is not the word that in both this thing they talk about, say
Being nutrition exactly, I'm just feeling that if I eat this way, will I, recognizably improve in certain ways? Is there research to say that?
look, I think there are research in favor of this also. You will find research in opposing this also. It's also a belief system, and then your like how do you take it, and like I personally believe that it is possible, because also I am a chef. I am anyway balancing thing nutritionally, so it is not a challenge for me. You give me like my Ayurveda doctor, when I work on Panchakarma, he sometimes gives me, okay, 4th, 5th day you can only give this 5 ingredients. He throw it on me, then I have to make something out of it, and then I ask questions also, like can I use this instead of that, and like to balance is because I am a chef, I always, anyway, that is never a problem for me, because I can't cook without balancing. But it also depends on person, and I don't think there will be only theories who will in favor of that, in opposition of that. And in Chinese medicine they also say, how the qi this thing, like what you are eating, if you are aggravated by say air, and then what you have to eat to calm that, so that your qi goes into the not in that same direction where the air is taking you. So that is the conversation that happens in this kind of situation. Or my Ayurveda doctor also says Vata, and
No, I think that there's also, I'm going to give an analogy, but like for indigenous ingredients, there are many indigenous varieties of all sorts of things, grains, vegetables, etc. Which means that the type of grain or vegetable has evolved in a particular setting in India, like right now we are talking about India, or in China or wherever, over time through natural selection or through like some amount of farmer intervention, like selective breeding for I want sweeter apples or whatever it is, like that kind of thing, but not through any attempt at hybridization or grafting or certainly not genetic modification, etc. So there is a sense that a lot of indigenous ingredients are. So first, there is a sense that the hybrid version is more nutritionally better. So you'll hear a lot of things about fortified rice, for example, or high yielding rice. That it will feed the country, it will have a greater yield, its nutrient value is more because there are more rice grains per panicle, etc. But then there is a counter argument to that we are hearing lately, which is that the yield may be more, but the nutritive value is not as good, right? That specific indigenous varieties have specific like a specific vitamin profile or mineral profile, etc., that then is actually contributing to the nutrition of the body in a way that it's not just that it gives you X number of carbs, right? Like, so again, like, how do you first you have to dismantle what you mean by nutrition. Secondly, that the research for this kind of thing in some cases has been done, right? Like every few months usually something comes out. That like about a year ago there was a thing saying that there are 3 types of rice, indigenous rice, that have been proven to be very good for stomach cancer, because they have a particular element that helps fight cancers of the gut and stomach area, alimentary canal. So but this research has only been done literally somewhere in 2018. So we don't know if the research is being done in these ways. Like, I don't know if anybody's actually doing like solid research on this. Secondly, of course, there is another body of research that is there, right? Like this tradition that we are following has its own body of research that says various things, and in theory should be replicable like any other scientific research. But has anybody tried to replicate it? We don't really know. So I think that it's the question itself has so many moving parts that it doesn't have an answer until some of these things are addressed first.
I'm wondering if in relation to something that you said just now in terms of the aggravation point, that how would if the source of classification for this tradition is, let's say, rasa and the other limiting concept seems to be like, I've heard this many times, people say Saukhya, that what you eat should not aggravate you. And that seems to be, it's not a positive principle to say whether you have enough number of proteins and whatever. It's the negative principle to say what shall not be. And what needs to go into your plate is sky's the limit. So there seems to be like a higher threshold concept, which is the way of selecting stuff using the concept of rasa, and like a lower threshold concept, which is whatever you do, you can't combine things in a way that it creates asaukya for this particular person or this particular. So I was wondering if something like that is how, because both are experientially available in a way that protein and carb is not experientially available. You have to like go get some chemical whatever research to get that understanding. Whereas these two are
there are, I think,
available because of personal taste which will be.
So I had a question unrelated to this conversation, but as a home cook who cooks in a tradition that is rooted in Dakshina Kannada and all of that I told you, and for me cooking of any dishes, comes down to how the ratio of, say, the tamarind to the salt to the jaggery that forms the heart and soul of the dish, and in which I end up boiling my vegetables and things like that. I'm just wondering how much of that the idea of balance and everything is available like in China, not just sort of textually limited to say the Ayurvedic texts as the way you are talking it, but for me it is something that is everyday practice. How much of what you are saying about all these things is everyday practice for the Chinese, or in your experience of the people you met there and all of that? Or is it something that, you said that Rinpoche was very excited, but
No,
how
there
much of
were-
it was,
No,
is there,
but I think that there are certain things that they also follow. Like in Suzhou, you get like the taste of the food is mostly there is a very it's sweet and pungent, sweet, pungent, and sour. These are the three tastes you see in Suzhou. Now Suzhou is an area which is like a full water body kind of a place. Lots of canals. So I'm sure that every locally, like, because it's a small place. Now in a city you won't get this kind of what you were saying, that because also, like, can you say that in a city like say Bombay there is a this kind of way? It is also depends on a place how people behave. In Suzhou at least I have seen that these are the things that people are very conscious of, that their taste are like, if you ask even random people, because we were in conversation with people, but it is not that, it is also there in practice in some ways, that not in bigger cities though, but like in a everyday kind of a practice you see in small I have seen in Suzhou. I don't want to say it anything that what I have not seen.
but just off question, how much, like in India we see a lot of this, like whatever we do, we now look for the wisdom of the West, in the sense that at least now there's a lot of things saying that people are always talking about, oh, we have always been doing this, and now Western science tells us we were doing it right. Now, how much of it is in circulation in China? That kind of, you said that there's a lot of India wisdom, but
No, I don't think it is that kind of thing much there. It is much more their own this thing. Even in I can tell you more about Japan, like better in these kind of things. Even if you eat there, say even if you are eating a continental thing, there are mostly lot of localization has happened through their changing of sauce, this, that, making it also available, but lot of their own food is like, it's not mostly West, like that kind of thing. Even in burgers it's quite it's like they will use the Kobe kind of beef, or like do it also, like do a katsu burger, and like that is very popular in Japan. I think that in Southeast Asia, in Japan, in China, I have like seen more like these things than say in India.
influenced by both Chinese culinary culture and various regional Indian culinary cultures.
And generally what we do is also we try to like in again both this in Ayurveda and in TCM, it's very important that where you are located, the point where you are located, it's very important that what ingredients you are having, because it's also related to the larger theory of 5 elements, that what you are consuming also should be in that same like it should grow in the same with all the 5 elements that you are at any point of time are dealing with. It should, your food should also have some of those things with the similar, like any particular location will have the water, the air, and all these things. So we also try to use this principle we try to use it very seriously. So we picked up things which are very local and seasonal right now.
So, for example, the tofu that we will be doing, though it's a Chinese way of treating tofu, we're using local corn, which is at the peak of its season over here. Similarly, also we are using the green,
the phali,
tuar
phali. So that is right now astringent. Like you, if you want, just have a piece. It's very astringent right now. So we are going to just do a very minimal processing, but so that the astringent you even taste it in your food, but not raw. We'll do little bit of both. Again, both this thing, they also, TCM and Ayurveda doesn't talk much about raw food.
Actually actively say
not to eat purely raw food. So we will do a little bit of processing with that, but all the elements we have picked up from whatever is there in right now in season. And so I'll like this tofu, this is a very unique technique which is used in China and Japan. That they use mung beans, they use various other things and make it either a tofu or they make a noodle out of it. Use the so that this is a particular, the technique is from there, but the unique this corn is from here, which is right now very sweet. But again, when we actually plate it, we will change the nature of the corn by using pungent. And any corn tofu is always even in Japan, corn tofu is used with wasabi. So the pungency actually traditionally also it's eaten and in Chinese tradition also it's eaten with a pungent kind of a sauce, like which will have a pungent tone to it. So we are also going to do that. And what we generally, whenever we talk about these principles and try to explain it, we try to keep a very neutral base. So the we do not do rice, because rice needs a different kind of mixing up things. We use a congee because it's little like it's soft and all that, like it is a thing on its own, but it has a very clean kind of thing which holds all the things, like all the other flavors or the taste on top. It can like it doesn't if you are eating rice, you have to mix something, no, like you mash or mix a sauce. In congee you are not doing it, so all the taste you can use very like clearly and sharp contrast. You can see that this becomes a clean slate kind of a thing. Congee works like that. So I'm using a rice which is again it's called Korpur Kanti. It's from Sundarban area in Bengal. But this is a very similar nature like Japanese Chinese rice, which is like fat, glutinous, and like when it's a new rice it's sticky, and when it is old rice it lose little bit of stickiness, but the glutinous, because of the glutinous nature of the rice, it gives a very good congee. So
and it has a lovely scent.
Yeah, it's mildly scented, but not too much scented, so that again our the overpower anything. So we are using that. So we thought that we will do all these things together, and like then when we eat, so I'll tell you what all we are doing, so you can also choose from vegetarian, non-vegetarian perspective. So the corn tofu will have a pungent. Actually, this is not hot. No.
I've stopped it for now. Whenever you're ready.
No, you put it. Like let's let it happen on its own. So we'll do the corn with the sauce. We are also teaching like little bit of trying to say how the sauce can be done, if anybody, because all these ingredients you can find it here. So like a couple of them, I have the rice I got from home, and other things, a couple of things, dry things, but most of the ingredients you get it in Goa. So it's also like sorry Gujarat, and so you can get like you can even make it if you want. I can, if you are interested, I can give recipes also, like also talk about how to make it. This is difficult, so very keen person can ask me because it's a very it's I'll tell you later because it's complicated. That's why I didn't do it here also. I did it early morning in the guest house. But the chicken, the egg, the arbi, the brinjal here, please try to taste. There is always a bitter undertone to a brinjal, especially the long one, not the small ones. Small ones are bitter, like you know it's bitter, but these are also has a bitter undertone, and we have used little bit of sesame oil with that, so that it enhance that the bitter this thing, because sesame oil has a bitter undertone, and like you will not feel it's bitter. It's not like Karela, but it has a bitter undertone. I think we should get that. And
so now we are making the pungent seasoning that will go on the corn tofu.
so it has ginger, garlic, coriander, chili, little bit of sugar and salt. And ideally I would have done lot of stir fry, but because it's I don't have that high heat thing, so I am doing this kind of thing. We don't use much ingredients, and we don't change also the taste much. So you try to keep the taste. I'll give you some cooking tip also. Like garlic, when you are doing, you should not never put it on this thing on hot water, hot oil. Always cook it with because otherwise garlic See, remove. So because it's better, like if you are actually in cold oil, you put garlic or onion. Like not in Indian food, like you can't do it with mustard oil. You can do it with white oil, peanut oil, and in Italian food, like if you are cooking pasta, never put the garlic or this thing in hot oil, because then it gets burnt. It doesn't get cooked from inside,
And the flavor of the garlic doesn't go into the oil, which is what you want.
in Chinese food and Asian food, you'd put the garlic because then it's high heat, quick cooking. It's not the slowly you are getting things done. So yeah. Go for salt.
Salt. Can you get salt?
So you won't call this stir fry? It's not stir fry.
What?
It's not stir fry.
Like it's kind of stir fry, but not because you don't do it for so long. And in this kind of heat, you do it in a higher heat. But you can also call it stir fry. Like not in a Chinese context. Black or white? Actually, it's losing its astringent.
Yeah. I think you can pick it up off the flame. Maybe put it into this.
So shall we eat or
Don't you need to do more dressing and all that?
everything is done? The next thing will be plating. Okay. Like I'll also show you the brinjal, because like all these things are half done.
So we'll finish
So finish everything and then
Brinjal, this is actually, we do a dish in our restaurant called Shangshi style brinjal. This also is the same kind of thing, but it's actually cooked in again high flame. So we can't do that. So I have made the sauce separately, and I have fried the brinjal separately. Now we will toss it.
They're deep fried.
They are deep fried.
So the sauce has Szechuan pepper, which we
Yeah.
got from China, and it's extremely pungent.
But this has the bitterness, so I have tried to
Balance the two.
balance it little bit in a way that like you still can figure the bitterness of the brinjal.
Shall I start?
No, I will. I'm doing it like a salad, but the thing is actually not like a salad. Even with the chicken, I'm trying to do like that. Like it should be cooked in a little different way. But I have made a dressing, and I'm just going to pour the dressing.
So normally you would do this on a wok and stir fry?
Yes.
Yes.
Now the chicken, I'll just finish everything, then we can start plating. Some needs any work? No. Oh. Actually, you can feel the bitter, because I can feel. I'll just go there.
the chicken is very simple. It's so when we do this kind of steaming the chicken or boiling the chicken, it's generally done for a kilo of chicken. It's 35 minutes is the rule. And then I could not do it again a sauce and toss it, but I have again made a dressing kind of a sauce that but it is the same taste as how the whole thing should be.
What is your?
So this has it's little complicated, I'll tell you. So this has so in peanut oil I have fried some small onions,
1 more spoon.
shallots and garlic and little bit of ginger, and then I have like fried properly so that the oil gets all the flavors, and then strained it, kept it for some time, so the oil got all the flavor of shallot, ginger, garlic and everything, but you can't see anything. So and then that oil I have used, and I have used oyster sauce and soya sauce, and that's just I'm pouring on it.
How does it get this thick consistency?
That is called emulsification. So when you do any salad, you put all the liquids and like stir it like with a at home you do it with a fork, never with a knife, and as you do for it takes some time, and preferably if you can actually do that, you are like you have all the liquid in a bowl and you are pouring the oil and doing it, then you get the best effect.
Or you can also put it at home, you can also put it in a jar and shake the jar, because the emulsification is to not just mix it but also bring in like little bit of air into the thing, and that changes the texture of the.
So actually if you would have seen like who did that, you did it, no? I did, yeah. So it's all liquid. Like she saw like how I gave her all different liquids, pour them together, and I just said that you beat it.
And keep beating it.
It completely changed.
It got very fudge-like consistency.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
actually this technique we use in dessert also a lot of the time. Salads for sure, salads, all the salad dressing, continental style, especially Italian and French style.
And what are the greens that you have put on this?
This is spring onion.
That's it.
That one.
So, we're now ready to
And
serve.
yeah, and the eggs are, I wanted to actually these eggs are tea eggs, and you have to keep it for overnight and all that, but we didn't have time, so it didn't get properly bleached, but you get a sense of the smell and the flavor of that.
Even if the look is not the
Akash,
same.
can you get the rice? And oh, I did this. So only one is this thing we have done is this is the earthy, ajwain and amchur. I have not used it. Wait, Akash, one second. There are actually the garlic shells we don't do, but it has garlic also. So the garlic they can take out. Akash, one whole lemon. The tea is no, there are 6 dishes. Huh? How many? No, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 7, let's 6 only. That one was the yam, because I got excited with this yam.
seen India once, so I just thought that that would be an interesting answer. Like, I want
much deeper, like a deeper bowl that you would eat, like fill to eat congee, and which is called kanni or parankanni over there. So we talked to a woman potter who remembered that her grandmother used to eat her food in that kind of a bowl, and we talked to her and we did a couple of rounds of samples of this kind of thing and came up with this
Like
shape
also
and size.
Different
Yeah.
principles we were using
Yeah.
to change into this shape, because this is a unique shape. It is not found generally. So it has a shape of a like what we say in F&B, that you have a main course. We have a size for a main course plate.
So it has that
also,
size.
That size, and we also tried to work with this whole idea of the Buddhist, the monk, they used to have one bowl, and so
A bowl that you can hold in your hand, have your whole day's meal in
because
it.
in Kochi we didn't have a restaurant, like it was a big kitchen and then it was empty, and in front we put some chairs. So we also wanted to make it very like possible, like you can carry, when if whoever will eat this, they will see that like you can hold it very easily. It's not heavy, it's not light, and it has a good balance.